Hello everyone, Books with Banks back again with another Malazan video for you all today. Today I will be looking at how Mr. Erikson has chosen to structure his 10-volume epic Malazan Book of the Fallen series. Before we get into the meat of the video though, I'll humbly ask that if anyone watching hasn't already subscribed, if you could please like and subscribe to my channel, especially if you're interested in seeing other Malazan videos. So yes, please, it would mean a lot if you could take the opportunity to do so. Also, one more quick note, I will say maybe a medium spoiler warning for this video, but just light spoilers, I guess to explain a little more what I mean by that. Everyone's definition and tolerance of spoilers might differ a little bit, so as I believe like settings and groups of characters is really all important in discussing why Steven Erikson structured his series in the way he did. I will be saying things like this set of 3 specific books all take place in this one location, or this other set of 3 books all take place in a different location, or I might say something like this list of characters aren't in this one book, probably for such and such a reason, but I won't be spoiling like the fates of any major characters or any major groups or factions here, and I'll try to remain as vague as possible where I can. So yeah, long story short, light spoiler warning, proceed at your own risk. And all that said, let's get into it. Have any of you ever been reading Malazan and you're reading this wonderful series for the first time? It's whisked you away. Erikson's whisked us all away to a fantastical setting with deep characters. We're a few books in, and then finally we feel like we're kind of getting a grip on the world and the characters and the whole point of everything. But then, bam, right smack dab in the middle, the next book, the 5th book in the series, seems to be set in a totally different continent with an entirely new and massive set of characters on its own. I expect this sort of thing might happen to a lot of us when we read Malazan and when we get to book 5, Midnight Tides, for the first time. Not only do the first 4 books keep bouncing back and forth between 2 different continents, but then the 5th book, Midnight Tides, introduces us to a mostly new cast of characters and an entirely new 3rd continent. So it really can feel like starting over in a lot of ways. It can feel confusing at first. I totally understand all of that. But today I want to take a broader look at how Erikson structured his series to try and answer the why of it all, and maybe address whether or not I actually think the structure that he went with paid off in the end. So I've heard said before that Malazan Book of the Fallen is really a 10-book series full of 3 separate trilogies. Book 9 and 10 would count, in this example, would count as just one kind of book's conclusion novel smashed together instead of 2, and if you make 9 and 10 count as one, that can make the 3 trilogies math work out. So these trilogies, they're not as easily broken down, though, as simply like books 1, 2, and 3 are one, then 4, 5, and 6, then 7, 8, and 9. It's not that easy. The trilogies do not reflect any suggested reading order. I would never recommend anyone trying to read these 10 books outside of the order they were published in. So if not chronologically, what does separate these trilogies? I feel like the series could easily be divided into rough thirds, divided on and based on the 3 predominant settings and continents of the world, these being the continent of Geographically, 7 Cities, and Lether. So, Trilogy 1 all takes place on the continent of Geographically. Up in the kind of northeast corner of most world maps, you'll see, try to find one online and bring it up here. Link to the source will be down in the description below. But if you look at this map, the continent up in the the northeast corner, that continent is Geographically, the kind of longer one. Like taller, more vertical looking one. This trilogy includes Book 1, Gardens of the Moon, Book 3, Memories of Ice, and then Book 8, Toll the Hounds. So that's the first trilogy, all pretty much set in this Geographically setting. I would say that the city of Darujistan specifically features prominently in most of these books. The Panion Domain and that conflict and its aftermath are also a big part of these three. Characters who are maybe a little more prominent or feel a little more unique to this trilogy would include people like Krupa, Animander Rake, Gruntle, Ikovian, Raliknam, Lorne, Cole, Chalice, Harlow, Tattersill, Silver Fox, Marilio, Baruch, just to name a few. So I guess kind of I'm doing that if you've just read like this, or you've read maybe the first three books. So you've read this one, book two, on a different continent, and then book three, and you're curious when you might see some of these characters again, or how important they might be throughout the remainder of the series. I'm just kind of listing those names to give some kind of idea of how far you are along in the journeys of people that, by and large, remain in this setting. But then, after Trilogy 1, we've got Trilogy 2, which this trilogy takes place on the subcontinent of Seven Cities, which is up in the northwest side of most world maps that are out there. This trilogy includes Book 2, Dead House Gates, Book 4, House of Chains, and Book 6, The Bone Hunters. So this sub-trilogy is really like, it's the desert setting one. It's brutal. It's all about the uprising and Shaik, the whirlwind goddess's rebellion, and the flimsy grasp that the Malazan Empire already kind of has at the beginning of these on this region of the world. Now, some characters that might feel a little more prominent and unique to these three would be characters like Coltane, Felison, Heberic, Lorik, maybe Karsa, but he kind of gets around between all the trilogies. Then you've got Kalam, Pearl, and so on and so forth. That's Trilogy 2. Then Trilogy 3, or really Tetralogy 3, is books 5, 7, 9, and 10. This mostly takes place on the continent of Lether, down in the lower southwest side of most world maps. And this loose trilogy includes Book 5, Midnight Tides, Book 7, Reaper's Gale, and then Books 9 and 10, Dust of Dreams and The Crippled God, respectively. I would say this is the setting, and this is the trilogy that has the most to do with things like the ancient Teist peoples of the world. For those that aren't familiar, the Teist people are kind of one group, sort of divided into three groups amongst themselves, and you get into more of their backstory with this setting. Beyond just the Teist Andi in the Jenna Bacchus kind of first trilogy of books. There's also a lot here in these four about elder races and resisting imperialism. And yeah, I'd say as far as characters go, characters like Tehold Bug are big characters in these. Briss, Hall, Fear, Udines, Saren, Silcha, Sublalapung, Feather Witch, the Errant, Red Mask, Sagcharak, Gunthmak, Yantovis, Yudandarig, again, just naming a few of the names that pop up in these books more than some of the other ones. So, why are all of these settings scattered throughout the chronological and publication order of the series like this? And why do we bounce back and forth between the first two trilogies for 4 books and then take another really hard pivot to introduce the third setting with Midnight Tides? And maybe more importantly than all of that, does all of this jumping from various groups of characters between books and jumping from between settings between books, does this all make the series more interesting and more compelling to read, or less? So now we're going to kind of narrow the focus and talk specifically about Book 5, Midnight Tides. I could see a lot of people getting to this and being frustrated at first, although I think you'll find if you look at other booktuber, MalazTuber reviews, if you look at maybe the Malazan subreddit, if you look at certain places where fans of this series come to chat and discuss these books, a lot of times this is considered some of people's favorites. It's definitely among one of my personal favorites. And so I'm going to try and think through not going off too much of a script here anymore, but just going to try and think through and maybe wing a little bit of an explanation of why this book still manages to be so good and so strong despite its weird sort of structural place, and despite kind of hitting a lot of fans, first-time readers, with that shock of, oh no, I know one character here that I just met in the fourth book, and there's like a couple real short scenes with one kind of vague character from the whole thing. But other than like those two people, there's really not much crossover here with anything else. So at least up to this point in the series, then of course the books after this, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, things all start to tie in together a little bit more. But when you get to this one, you do get that sort of shock and like, oh, I have to learn so much again. I have to just really kind of start from scratch. So let's think about first, why did Erikson choose to do this? And if I had to guess, I would say these three continents, the three main continents of the series that we explore, he knew he was going to be pulling characters and storylines from all of those to build towards his conclusion in books 9 and 10. He knew he would need to pull characters. He knew he was going to be working with a massive cast. With a massive cast with unique and interesting backstories in their own right. So he couldn't just start us with the setting, the Lether continent, where everything eventually comes to a head. A lot of the kind of foundational moments in characters' lives happen well before they get to the Lether continent, primarily for the story he's trying to tell. A lot of things that happen with Malazan characters and other people that the Malazan army kind of picks up along the way, or affects their lives in some way along the way. A lot of that, what's going on there, is happening on the Geographically continent of the first kind of setting trilogy of books, and then a lot of it's happening on the Seven Cities continent. And so I think Erikson was bouncing back and forth between those two settings that have enough crossover between themselves and enough references to the same political systems, same kind of things going on just in the world around them, so that we could get our footing on a massive cast of characters that would eventually come or be building towards kind of like physically, geographically moving their location and the action of their trilogies all kind of towards this final group of 4 books, or this final setting. It's not the last 4 books in the series again, because we still have like books 6 and 8 happen after this, and those are both respectively the conclusions to what's happening in Seven Cities and what's happening in Geographically. But going 6 books and only then being introduced to this setting, that might have been even more jarring. So I am happy that bringing us to the Lether cast of characters, to the Teist Edur and the Letheris Empire, the Letheria Empire, and Tehol and Bug and Rulhed Sengar, Fear Sengar, giving us more backstory on Troll Sengar, I'm glad Erikson didn't make us wait too long to get into those characters, because as I said, this does turn, despite a lot of that initial frustration and sort of panic, having to relearn a lot of stuff, this does turn out to be, I think, a fan favorite entry in the series. And I think I might now, just for a second, try and guess at and dismantle a little bit of the concern of where those frustrations come from. I think with some other series, and just with reading large epic fantasy series in general, when we get to side stories, and when we get to kind of the middle of series, sometimes we can feel the sense that, okay, this is just a side quest that's stretching out the narrative. I just want to get back to my main characters. I just want to get back to the people that actually matter. And I think that the fault of that And don't, that's a totally genuine reaction. I'm not trying to say that's not a valid reaction or experience to reading long epic fantasy series, feeling like we're spending a little bit of time exploring too much of the side stuff, too much of just stuff that's not going to matter that much in the end anyway. Um, the way that I think Erikson subverts this, though, is by the time we get to this fifth book, even though we're being introduced to so many new things, all of it seems like it's really, really important, especially the emphasis on just how characters talk about elder gods, emphasis on sort of our trust in Erikson that, okay, he can't just be throwing this in here for no reason. This must matter. Either characters from this book are going to go to those other settings, or characters from those other settings are going to come to this setting. This must matter somehow. I think Erikson, by this point, has gained enough of the reader's trust where we're hoping for that to be the case, that this isn't just a side story. But I think really more than anything, the way Erikson writes it, he doesn't write it like a side story. He cares about these characters just as much as he cares about the characters in the 4 books that came before this, and the thousands and thousands of pages that came before this. Erikson doesn't let up the gas. He doesn't just give kind of ho-hum storylines and dramatic moments to this cast. If anything, he gives us some of the most heart-wrenching sibling relationships in the whole series here. So he, in a weird way, I'd say, even though we have to reset and start back at a slower pace kind of to be introduced to these new characters and this setting, because Erikson has so much ground to cover in catching this setting and this cast up to speed with what he gave the other 2 settings a couple books already time enough to do. Erikson has to, I think, try even harder here to get us to like this setting, this group of characters, as much as we already do the 7 Cities and Geographically ones. That by the end of this, I think fans of, in particular, the Lether setting could make a case that it's their favorite, even though we've had significantly less page time with most of these people. I think a lot of people out there would agree, a lot of Malazan fans would agree, that one of the funniest kind of duos, one of the funniest couple of characters are in this book. And they're funny here. They're, I think, even funnier. They get better, more outrageous later on, but they're great here as well. And just beyond the characters, the themes are also, they continue to be about imperialism and have this sort of post-colonial kind of bent towards them. And so it still, none of it feels like it's not a Malazan book. It's very much still it feels very, very consistent thematically with the 4 that came before it. It's just the cast and setting are by and large different. And while reading this, knowing you have 5 more books to go, knowing that you've already spent a lot of time in 2 other settings, and maybe hoping that you will get to spend more time in this setting in the back half of the series, and you do. 3 whole books, book 7, 9, and 10, also you spend a lot of that in this setting. I think Erikson understanding the position of the reader and the hopes and expectations of the reader makes it hard to put this down, because we want to be prepared for everything that's that's going to come, that we're hoping and anticipating might come, no matter how vague our anticipations are. Erikson, I think, very smartly understands how closely we're going to pay attention to this book, because it's sort of like, okay, it took me a while to get into the Geographically setting and cast, and the 7 Cities setting and cast. Now here I have a 3rd chance. And why is he introducing this one later than the other 2? Is that because this is going to be more important for the endgame? Hint, hint, yes, it is going to be more important for the endgame, at least as far as the setting itself goes, if not the cast But so I think this is just a really great testament, this book in particular, to how well Erikson understands what might be going through the minds of his readers, and how well he's anticipated that initial shock reaction of, oh no, we're resetting again. And then just the rest of the novel, the actual details in here, the actual story that he tells with Midnight Tides, is a testament to how hard he worked and how much effort he put into making sure we were caught up to speed with this setting, and that we cared about this setting in this cast as much as the other two. And I mean, long story short, I think it's basically a lot of that concern and panic at first might be like, oh no, we're going into side story territory. This is stuff, these are characters Erikson doesn't care as much about, so why should we? But I think the reason that the way that the structure of his series works so well is that, no, he does care about this stuff just as much as the other two settings, the other two trilogies. Not only does he care about this stuff so much, but he, for some reason, or for very specific reasons, he chose to hold off and hold back on introducing us to all of the really cool ideas and the really fun characters in here. I think a lot of times epic fantasy fans can feel, oh no, is the series starting to bloat? Are we starting to go off into tangents? And I think even if that might be the initial reaction and fear with the beginning of Midnight Tides, through the course of this novel, Erikson proves beyond a doubt that that's not at all what this is. This isn't slowing down. This isn't going off on tangents. This is, if anything, ratcheting up the tension by introducing that final, all-important setting, or more final, all-important setting, and introducing us to the last, like, really significant kind of group of collection of characters that are going to be really important. That's a bit rambly, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you were in the process of reading the series, maybe you've started Midnight Tides, maybe you're 1 or 2 books before Midnight Tides, and you're just kind of curious how often you'll see some of your favorite settings or some of your favorite characters, I hope this video has been a little bit helpful. If you've heard things about how much this series jumps around between settings, hopefully this video helped to kind of explain why I think Erikson chose to do it in that way a little bit, and why that I feel it was a good thing and that it actually helps build to a better crescendo, the way that he chose to do to structure everything. I hope this video got all that stuff across. Again, it was a bit rambly. I had a little kind of draft of a script up for this, but not too much of one, so I was winging some of it. If anything I've said was a little bit confusing, or if anyone wants to kind of push back against this idea and thinks that Midnight Tides is actually poorly placed in the series, thinks this should have come earlier, been integrated within the first couple books better, I'd love to hear any kind of counter arguments, thoughts like that down below as well. But yeah, all that said, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.